Hello.
Hey, friends. Welcome to Child of the Redwoods Live, where two former public school teachers who choose to homeschool their own children share their views on education, on parenting, on Montessori, and life and love. I'm Aubrey.
I'm David. So happy to have you here. Whether, wherever you are in your journey, we want to help you decide what kind of education you want to give to your own child. So whether you homeschool or not, we believe education is a journey you take with your children. And those opportunities start over every day. So, let's have a conversation. And today's conversation, we're excited about this one, comes from our community, had been asked. It is, how do we teach what needs to be taught without forcing a child to learn what they're not ready for? It's a tough question.
It is. Yeah, we all know there are things out there everyone is expected to learn by the time they get to be a grown up. And the question is, we got 18 years usually with our kids to teach them what they need to know. And so part of our work is honing down on like what is critical, what is crucial, and then making sure they know that before they fly away.
Yes, that's
and
right.
It's not a small responsibility. It can feel quite intense, quite heavy.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So that's what we're going to talk about. We want to give you a few updates first.
But first, this just in.
This just in. We just, in Constellation, we just planned the next 3 months for our monthly themes with our Constellation members. And it's feeling really, really good right now. I think last night when we did our little crunch session, we went over each of the themes that we're going to be teaching our kids. We did this big brainstorming session. And I think that this is a crucial kind of ritual to do every 3 months or so. Everybody talks about planning. And the thing about planning is they always think that planning is like a big pain in the butt, right? Like, the question I always get is, how much time is it going to take me to plan? As though this is some kind of drudgery that you have to do if you're a homeschooler or a teacher. Like,
Totally.
who has time for all that planning, right? But if we can switch our mindset a little and start seeing planning as something that's like really kind of part self-care for us, and just part sitting down and just like a hobby, having fun, sitting down with our calendars and brainstorming fun things to do with our kids, it can really make that planning time not something that is like, how much time is it going to take to plan? It really turns into like, ooh, I can't wait. Like, I'm going to get my candle lit and my tea, and I'm going to settle down, have some nice time, and take a deep breath and settle on into my planner. And it's like fun. It's like a hobby, So I always tell our members not to feel afraid of planning. In Montessori, what we do mostly anyway is documenting, observing our children and like actually writing down what they did rather than spending so much time planning. But it is part of being a teacher is doing a little planning and preparation and ahead of time. And it can just be something fun. And so in Constellation, it's something fun that we're doing together this year, every 3 months. So if you are looking for help with planning and you kind of are at the point where you're like, it feels like so overwhelming to keep going to the internet and looking for ideas on your own. You kind of feel alone in this process. Brainstorming is actually something that is best done together.
It is.
Even when we're creating the themes, it's like a whole process of bouncing ideas back and forth and kind of pulling some stuff together and getting feedback. And I think as homeschoolers, sometimes we can feel really alone when we're trying to do that whole process on our own.
That's right.
But any teacher in the classroom will know that if you just go into the teacher next door's classroom and say, hey, what are you guys doing? And I was thinking of doing this. What do you think about that? And here's how the lesson went with the kids the other day. A lot of teaching magic happens that actually hones your skills for actually teaching the kids that you're with better. And that happens in the classroom. And it happens at home as homeschoolers too.
That's
so
right.
It's something fun that we do together. You're welcome to join Constellation and take that journey with us if you have a 2 to 9-year-old.
That's
So
right.
no, really, you can have a child that's a little older than 9, in Constellation, but really like that's the age group that we aim for is family-centered themes and
Yep.
fun learning activities for those age groups.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun stuff. We've got Stone coming up in November. We have folk? No, Craft in December. And what do we have in? Oh, Frozen, I think, is in January. So we have some fun themes coming up, handling a variety of kinds of topics. Just some really good stuff coming up. Speaking of things that are coming up, we have our primary class, the spring session. We're going to be enrolling for early birds. We've been getting a lot of emails. So for those of you who are wondering, when can I take the primary session? And that's for those of you who have a toddler, preschooler, or kindergartner that you're looking to homeschool or home supplement. This is going to teach you the foundation. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little later today, in fact. And so we're going to be opening our early bird for the spring session in just a couple days on the 10th of October. You'll be able to get that at charlotteredwoods.com. We just did a huge revamp of that program. So any current members or alumni, you already have that. And if you've been wanting to know what's in there, we have some you can go and take a peek at some of the stuff, but it's over 700 lessons for those three age groups, for the preschool, toddler, and kindergarten set, leveled out across the 3 levels so that you can kind of guide along. It really fits well with what you might be doing if you already have a set of curriculum or materials at home, or you're interested in Constellation and you kind of want to know the why behind the what. This is the place to go. So again, that opens on Monday, the 10th. And if you join, you get to go into our private community pretty much right away. As soon as you enroll, we'll get alerted that we have a new member, and you'll have a chance to join us and start asking questions and participating with others in our private Montessori community, not on Facebook, where you get to have focused conversations with like-minded Montessori homeschoolers and parents. So welcome to join us for that.
Yes, and bonus to those of you who join as early birds, the live sessions and the discussion sessions that go along with the primary course actually don't start until March. But if you join early, you just get access right into the community.
And you get all that content right away, too. It's lifetime,
you get it all right away.
immediate access to the core content, all those new lessons.
So don't feel like you need to wait until February to join. Joining earlier actually has big benefits. So you just like slide right in right away, and you can just start feeling your way through. Yeah. And a lot of our members actually like to binge through that content and download it, study it first. Yeah. And when they do that, it actually helps them to feel like they can concentrate on those discussions and the live lectures even more.
Yeah.
So there are big benefits to joining early. So I encourage you, if you're on the fence, to go ahead
come on
and do it. Yeah. So
yes, speaking of homeschooling in our own home, with something funny happened. I guess it's not funny, haha. I think so. By coincidence, 3 of the 4 members of our family are taking a ceramics course, but not the same ceramics course.
Not the same ceramics course. That's right. I know.
Both of our sons are taking ceramics, and you're taking ceramics, and I'm the got left out. That's
I don't know. For a long time, I've been like making mousy, I wish I could take a pottery class noises, and then we had a pandemic that like everything was closed. So I felt like I was on the waiting list for these ceramics classes that are local to us, but they only allow a few members to take their beginner classes, and so I was like hanging out on their list, and then everything shut down. And so now, years later, my dream finally comes true. I get to take my pottery class.
Exactly.
So I am kind of embarrassingly the most excited person in my class. I'm trying not to have too much of a bounce in my step, but I think like the instructor, you're like kind of looking around at the students in the class. You can always tell there's always like that one student, right? The one that's like, yeah, teach me more. Just like a little too excited and too into it. And in the class, I was realizing like, I'm just bopping around like, yeah, I'm going to get my clay. I have no idea what what I'm doing, but I'm so into it. And I'm trying to rein myself in, be chill, like one of the crowd. I'm just here learning pottery, no big deal. It's not like it's a lifelong dream or anything. Just standing here wedging some clay. Yeah,
That's right.
let's just do the thing, right? But no, I'm super excited about it. But I
Yeah.
didn't know that our boys would be super excited about
They
it
are.
too.
And all three of you are having a very different experience. I think it's reflective of your personalities, but you're all loving it.
Yep.
You're all having a great time.
No,
It's so primordial in a way. Like, you think about it, the curriculum, when you look at what we want littles to learn, not just bigs, but that those toddlers, preschoolers, first graders, second graders, art is essential. It's one of the 10 core subject areas that we say is a part of that toddler to third grade experience. The arts and the visual arts is a domain within that, and within that, working with clay. But it's not just found in the arts. You also find it in humankind, and the study of pottery and the study of history. Our use of clay and our use of natural materials like stones, which will be in our topic for November in Constellation, is so old. We're doing in our homeschool right now, we're doing a study of ancient history. So prehistory through the fall of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire. And we're in the early parts. And so it's all about these early civilizations and the working with pottery and, making, turning mud into bricks and things like that. And here we are many, many, many thousands of years later, still doing it. And it's so satisfying. Mm-hmm. For the littles, it's the sensorial part, right? Like the touching and the feeling. But, it's not just the littles. You've been telling me over and over about, you come back from working with the clay and you're like, oh, it's very rough. It's the tactile.
Oh, yeah. My palms, I told him that my palms and I lost my fingerprints. I know.
Your jewel thief days are
fortunately, my phone is broken. I don't have a fingerprint sensor.
That's right.
So it doesn't matter so much. But yeah, my hands are just, as I was working with the clay, I was like, oh, this is like a massive exfoliator,
Yeah, that's right.
People people pay a lot to go and do those mud baths,
spas
to exfoliate your skin. Just do pottery, friends. It's the win. But I was thinking about the origin of pottery, and it is in our lower elementary philosophy, or perspective, that we always think about the origin of things, humankind's interaction with the natural world.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the origin of pottery really came from children, I bet.
You think so?
I do, because who else likes to go in and like muck around in the mud more than a child,
yeah,
right?
That's true.
And like, you probably have already seen your little one out there trying to mix water and make mud and then like form things out of it, even if they're just feeling the sensory experience of it.
Yeah.
But eventually, if you play in mud enough, you start to realize that it will hold its shape. If it has enough density, it'll start to hold its shape, and you can kind of just start to form little things out of it. I think a lot of people don't think of mud play as like a beginner's course in pottery. But it really is, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that you can do at home in your own backyard. You can go out, make some mud, and call it a pottery session and have fun.
That's right.
Doesn't matter if you don't have the kiln or you're not going to bake it or anything. The original form, the original kiln, right, was the sun. The sun
That's
just
right.
air dried things, kind of baked it together, and humans learned different methods.
They learned the right ratio of materials in order to make it cohesive.
Anyway, a magical experience for our family, but also some fun things that you could do yourself this fall with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think a great lesson about this idea of lifelong learning, which is so critical to having a good mindset, a good approach to learning. It's why we talk about it being a journey you take with your children. And sometimes that can mean literally, and sometimes it can be more figuratively, but humans love to learn. We love to teach and learn. It's just part of our nature. And don't don't ever cut that part of yourself off. And you're never too old or never too young. And sometimes the things that can be fascinating to a 2-year-old are also really fascinating to an 80-year-old and everybody in between and
Yes.
beyond. And that's because we are human beings. We're all just kind of together in this. So embrace that, do family things together, do things for yourself, and then come back with that joy. And I bet you'll find that it sparks a joy in your littles as they look to you and say, well, I'm curious about that now too. I want to know what you want to know.
Let's get into our main topic.
Yeah.
So to kind of transition into there, thinking about cultivating this lifelong learning that we know we want our children to have, that we can be modeling ourselves for them, and also kind of contrasting the concept of like, hey, I'm going to take a pottery class because it sounds like fun and it's been on my bucket list forever and it's something I want to do. And so obviously I am super invested in the class if I've been waiting for this thing for so
Sure.
long and I paid a bunch of money and I'm like all in.
That's right.
I am going to commit myself to learning it, right? I'm really going to put myself out there. But what if someone else signed me up for this pottery class and I didn't really want to take it in the first place, or
Yeah.
I wasn't really into it and I'm feeling really insecure because everyone else is, I don't know,
They seem better.
they seem better,
They seem
or
excited or
yeah,
happy or
maybe
they
I'm
wanted to
that
be
person
here.
in the class that's just like mushing the clay and not really feeling into it. What then? This happens to our children too. So,
Yeah.
back to our essential question. And Brittany, I see you there, and I'm so glad that you joined us. She says, "Yay, I'm so excited for this topic because it's been something I've really been struggling with
Well,
recently."
we all struggle with this
Yes, we
question,
all do.
even people who have studied it. It is a tough question. Theorists, educators, practitioners, we've debated this over and over and over and over and over, and there's so many different points of view on it. So I'd love to actually. I know we have a bunch of folks in the out there right now. I don't know if any of you are at a keyboard or you're in a place. I'd love to know what are some of the theories or thoughts that you have heard about what does readiness look like, or how do we balance between the forcing a child to learn or not, or even more generally the child's natural desire to learn. What I was Anybody out there want to pop into the chat here and let's see that. While they're doing that, what are some of the things that you were taught? I know you came from a Montessori background, so you always had a healthier point of view, but we're all really aware of it. What are some of the things that you've heard over the years about people's expectations with learning and the forcing a child to learn? While we're seeing if anybody has had anything to pop in there.
Okay, well, I think that, in thinking about in contrast to my early childhood and my first elementary school, which was a Montessori school up through third grade, so this lower elementary, all the way through lower elementary, the difference between the way my school was structured was it was very, very open ended. I could kind of there were some things that I had to do. And the thing that I didn't want to do that I was forced to do was math.
Yeah.
I'm not naturally interested in math. So it's kind of like that person who didn't want to take pottery in the first place. I don't know who would not want to take pottery in the first place, but I was that person who
Yeah.
didn't want to do math. And I remember that there were times when in our lower elementary classroom where I sat down with some math problems and plugged myself through it and didn't really feel inspired. And so I imagine that a teacher might have wondered about me. How do I get Aubrey interested in math? How do I get her to do this math and practice it without forcing her to do it, right?
Yeah.
And what I see in contrast with that approach, the wondering, like, how can I involve this child, is in direct contrast to the traditional school system here in the United States, at least.
I think in a lot of places.
In a lot of places where we see the child as like being forced to do school entirely. Like the whole existence of school is
They're not going to want to do
force
this.
kids to learn.
They just want
right?
to goof off and play outside or sit around or whatever.
And they do want to do those things.
Of course.
Right.
All humans enjoy sloth.
It's like we send them, we have all this language built around it too, right?
But we do. We have such a low expectation.
Sending our children to school. Yeah. Just send them there.
That's right.
And then we have to make them sit down and get to work and get on task, right? They've got to be on task. And in those kind of situations, you're really working against the child's natural drive to be curious
That's
about the
right.
world and to
That's right.
want to learn. You're kind of working from the assumption that they don't want to be there and that you're going to have to force them to learn how to read, to write, to do math, to to get good grades. Like, you're going to have to make them into good learners,
That's
right?
right.
And I think it even comes through in even those of us who are well-meaning, talking about education, talking about cultivating the lifelong learner,
That's
as though it's
right.
something that's like our job to do. Like, they're not already going to be a lifelong, interested, engaged person. We've got to somehow make them into that
Well, and the idea of the
person, right?
cultivate is to like shape into a certain image, your image, as opposed to like a forest, which doesn't need to be cultivated by a human. It just has a
Right.
natural balance. And so that's right. We have this idea of control and trying to systematize and control things and then expecting a certain outcome. Like, I'm going to plow this earth to make it grow corn, and I'm going to cultivate it. And, we then extend that to the idea of learning, like, oh, we have to take this untamed mind that would just rather go play video games all day and cultivate it so that it can be ready to learn for life. And rather than look and say, like, this brain is already ready to learn for life, how do I look at it and understand what it's ready to produce?
Mhm.
Or like, what is it already doing, and how can I help it sort of blossom in a certain way, in the way that a forest will find a balance through fire and insects and the biodiversity. So it's just a really different mindset. And so it probably seems weird even for us to think like, well, the mind is a forest, isn't just a wild place? But it's not. Like, a forest
No,
actually has
it
a
has an
very,
order.
very, very complex order that
It does.
just because we can't understand it as humans because we're too dumb doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right. So
We're just oblivious, just like
yeah,
not
our
aware. Yeah.
unawareness or lack of ability to perceive it doesn't mean it's not real. It just means we aren't quite there and we don't really get it. And so we want to look at it and judge it in comparison to something that we can understand, a cultivated garden. So yeah, we have this idea that the child will need to be put into a position to force to learn, or that they love to learn at first, and they love their teacher, and then they suddenly get surly, and then they become a teenager, and all bets are off. We just have this we have a very low expectation of kids, and it's not new. This was as true in Montessori's day and earlier
Yep.
as it is today. So it's not just like an American school thing. This is a widespread view, an old view of adolescence and learning and putting kids into school buildings and things like that.
Mhm.
Say Alicia has had a little comment. It's not a theory. She says, an observation in our own family. I can gauge when our kids are ready for something by introducing it in the form of play. Exactly.
Mhm.
So, with that, let's talk about what Montessori teaches us, because that's right on the money for that, I think.
Yep.
So, there are lots of theories. There's people who have a very negative point. I was raised with the idea of like, spare the rod, spoil the child. And that extends to just about everything in life. And it's not just an old timey, rural Texas, my background kind of mindset. I've heard it here in the Bay Area,
Mhm.
the supposedly cosmopolitan San Francisco Bay Area. People who think like, no, actually, kids they have to be forced.
Right.
They have to be forced to learn. That's the only way you're going to get it through them, and that's just the wrong mindset. It's like saying that the cultivated garden is superior to the forest, right? And it's only because we can understand easily one because we built it, and we can't understand easily the other because we didn't. It sort of precedes us. It comes before us. Okay. So here, of course, at Child of the Redwoods, we don't take that mindset. We take a mindset that's based on Montessori's work. And there are essentially, I would say, three things that we want to know. And Alicia, this is going to go to what you're saying.
Mhm.
The first is that what Montessori tells us is that there are sensitive periods and planes of development that have put a child into different periods of readiness or receptiveness. So these sensitive periods, so there's a sensitive period, for example, with the first, second, third grade set toward moral authority and social interaction. This is a time when children will idolize a parent or a superhero. They're looking for moral hierarchy in the same way that for a younger child, let's say somebody in that preschool age, they have a sensitivity for sensorial learning. Like, they want to touch. So you see a little child who's always touching things, putting it in their mouth. That's an expression of a sensitive period. And then we also have these planes of development. So we know that these periods happen in a regularly, normally or typically they happen in kind of an identifiable pattern that you go up and down. And we have this thing called the first plane, which is 0 to 6. And there's a kind of like a mountain where you come up to the top, which is the first half of it, and then the second half. And we know that there's sensitive periods within that as you move through this. So Montessori found this and observed it, and we've been able to prove it over and over again with even further neuro research and to the brain and to help people learn. So the first one is there are sensitive periods and planes of development that children are going to walk through. The second is that all humans, we've said this already, but I just super emphasize because it's so important. We tend to not believe this as a society, but all humans, especially children, have an innate desire to learn and can self-educate when they're given the opportunity and environment. And Montessori observed this herself.
Mhm.
We've observed it many, many other times that it doesn't mean that a child is automatically going to come upon the idea of calculus and then invent calculus or advanced astrophysics or molecular biology. That's not the same thing. But what it does mean is that there is an innate desire to want to know what those things are, and that given the right environment and opportunity and the person himself or herself, that it will be drawn to explore deeper and deeper and deeper. That's why we eventually did create advanced physics and biochemistry and all that stuff, because we were drawn to it like a moth to the flame. So we have a natural desire to learn.
And this is super different from what's going on in most schools today.
Which will say that there's
even, I mean, Montessori is only one set of, educational theories that agrees that children can self-educate.
That's right.
There are many philosophies out there other than Montessori too. So we're talking about progressive education in general is aligned with that. But most of education today in schools is aligned with the opposite point of view. So if we're saying that we believe that children have this innate desire to learn and can self-educate when given opportunity and environment, what most of our schools are coming with is the idea that children do not have the innate desire to learn and cannot self-educate, that they have to be spoon-fed, right? That they can't self-educate, they have to be educated by us.
Sage on the stage, we used to say.
And so I think it's important to recognize that if you want to get to where we're hoping to get to today, which is to understand how to teach what needs to be taught without forcing, you have to believe wholeheartedly in the statement.
Yeah, you have to believe
You got to buy into it.
That's right. And you have to structure your learning around it. In my experience, most educators, teachers, administrators, they do believe that. They do believe that learning is joyful. But the system that we've created, this is the difference in learning and schooling,
right?
Does not really allow for that. And it's not a knowledge of education thing, it's an economics thing.
Yeah. So even if the teacher believes it in their heart, the system and the structure around the assessment requirements, just the
marching kids through grades. So we have a first grade and a second grade that doesn't have anything to do really with this idea of sensitive periods and planes of development, maybe broadly.
Or self-educating.
Or certainly nothing about the idea of the joy of learning. Right. So like all first graders are going to do this and all second graders are doing this. It's very loosely associated with the idea that there's sensitive periods and that roughly a first grader will be sort of in the same kind of plane. But the difference is that it has nothing to do with the child's actual desire to learn, because it's really, really, really expensive and hard to play with your child, like you're saying you're doing, Alicia, and then from there gauging their readiness and interest. But that's how actually you have to do it. Yeah. You can't systematize it to this extreme level where they're going to sit and they're going to take tests and so forth. That just doesn't work in terms of actually understanding that. And it creates a negative environment that really deprives us of the ability to connect with that innate desire to learn, which goes to the third principle. So the three principles that we would follow in answering this question are: one, we should know that there are sensitive periods and planes of development, and we can use that knowledge to help. That two, humans, especially children, have a desire to learn, and if they're given the right opportunity and environment, they can self-educate, again, to a degree. And that three, our job as parent or parent teacher or educator, whomever, is to one, create that prepared environment filled with appropriate materials, and then observe what they're doing and then modify that environment accordingly. So, in other words, to put this kind of more simply, I would say our job is to serve the child a diverse diet of subjects and concepts, and then not to get hung up when they don't eat everything on their plate.
Mhm.
It's not a big deal. They're not going to starve. Why do we say that? Because we're serving them the things that would match according to what we understand about sensitive periods and planes of development and our own expectations as a society, which I don't think should be discounted. And we're presenting them to the child and we're saying, which of these things are you engaging with now? And then watching them pick that up. If they don't pick up all the things, that's okay,
Mhm.
because we're going to serve it to them again. Now, of course, we're going to talk a little bit in a minute, like what happens if they never pick up that one, like what if they never eat their peas? Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but this is the essential, like this is the bedrock of it. And so again, to go back to what Alicia's saying, you're absolutely right. You're gauging their readiness by engaging in play, which is another way of observing what you're seeing and then presenting a document, preparing the environment to reinforce that.
Okay, so I really love this analogy, by the way. This as you're talking about the serving of the meal, I'm envisioning what in some homeschooling circles we call like serving kids like a little monkey plate. You know how you go to the zoo? Have I talked
Yeah,
about the monkey
yeah,
plate? You go to
yeah.
the zoo and they don't go in the cages and say, okay, now you're going to have some carrots and now you're going to have some lettuce and here are some grapes. No, the zookeeper will go into the one of the primate cages or the monkey cage, and they'll like put in a little bit of lettuce in there, some grapes, some
Yeah.
cantaloupe, so whatever they feel like that animal should eat. And then the animal gets to choose. Like they go in and they're like, maybe I feel like lettuce right now, or
Yeah.
maybe I'm going to eat these grapes. And it's so fun to go. We actually love zoos personally.
Yeah.
Just it just is so great to go and it gives I think there's a bit of mindfulness in there, like going to the zoo and watching and observing these animals just interacting with whatever is in there with them,
Very
right?
few of us have the opportunity to engage with,
with
such a
with nature,
biodiversity.
right?
Yeah,
Oh
like
yeah, such diversity,
you'd have to be
yes.
incredibly wealthy and
um
privileged.
so I yeah, so just watching, the way they kind of interact and what they choose, and so there's kind of this concept of like your kid is really really busy, you want to make sure that they've got all their nutrients, serve them a monkey plate, like full, put all the things on it and then just like bring it to them. In Montessori, what we usually say is kind of an unschooly type of thing. In Montessori, what we usually say is involve your child in the snack process, right?
Right.
Like cutting up their own snack, and maybe they're going to be eating their peas while serving themselves,
That's
right?
right.
But I love this idea of thinking of food as containing the nutrients. But they're all kind of in different forms, right? You
Totally.
got lots of vitamins in there, but you could get them by eating a variety of different foods. It doesn't
Totally.
have to only be peas, right? It
Yeah,
could be
because
something else.
you're the one you're using your knowledge of these sensitive periods and the readiness. So this is like if you took a foundations course or you studied Montessori or you studied educational philosophy otherwise, or you're just following along with a group who's helping you curate through that, you'd be aware of, okay, a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, this is what the kinds of things that I might look for, that this are signs of readiness and so forth. This is the plate I'm going to make. And it's not going to be just here's some cupcakes and here's some pie and here's the ice cream. Like we're going to curate the plate based on those qualities of what we know they're going to be ready for and what we as a culture have decided are valuable for them to focus on. And that's from the meal they're going to choose from. It's not like you're taking them into a grocery store and saying, go pick out whatever you want. You're curating down to that list of things that you want them to pick. And you know that whatever they eat from that plate is going to be nutritious because you've given them nutritious things
Right.
to eat.
And also there's trust in there, because what if they only choose to eat the cantaloupe, like for all 3 meals that day? They've only eaten cantaloupe. Do we worry? Maybe it's kind of in our nature to worry, like if they're only eating cantaloupe, they're not eating any of the other greens,
Yeah.
right? Of course, we want them to eat the greens, but sometimes, and a child's nutritionist will tell you this, sometimes children will like gorge on one kind of food, and then later on that week, they'll make up for it. And that's actually okay biologically. Like, we don't have to have every single thing every single time we eat, right? I think they used to say that in order to get enough protein as a vegetarian, you had to eat beans and rice together.
Yeah.
But now they know, like, you just eat some beans sometimes and eat some rice other times, and it's going to turn into protein anyway.
That's right.
Inside your body. So there's this element of like having some faith that the child will themselves self-educate themselves nutritionally as well, right?
That's right.
If you have provided the things that are nutritious. So I love that analogy.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about, let's kind of get real for a second, because we know that there are some things children need to know before they become adults.
Yeah, what's going to go on that plate?
Yeah. Okay. So I think what most people tend to worry about is it tends to be the 3 R's, right?
Yeah.
So reading, writing, and math, those are kind of like the old standards for school. Like, what do you learn in school? Good school and teach you the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And yes, those are important. They look different during the different stages of development, right? So what we're doing in primary is, we take those 3 R's and we're saying, okay, we want our children to be able to read, write, and do some math. So what we're going to do in primary is we're going to prepare them for being able to use those skills later on when they're older.
That's right.
So everything we do between the ages of like 2 and 6 is preparation. And that preparation happens in a variety of ways. Like those of you who have taken the primary class for homeschool the Redwoods, you already know what I'm going to say about writing is, if you want to teach the child to learn how to use a pencil, you need to teach them fine motor skills first. And that means developing this hand strength. So picking something up with the hand, and then eventually teaching them how to use these 3 little fingers that are going to be used for holding a writing utensil. So it's all about the preparation. And there's really something wonderful that can happen when you remove the expectation during that age, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And Maria Montessori herself found that out, particularly with reading, because during her time, way back in 1906, nobody expected children to be able to read or write. Like, just nobody expected that they could do it. The concept of reading and writing wasn't taught until 1st grade. And so she was kind of working in an environment where there were 0 expectations. Not so true for us anymore.
That's right.
We are in a culture right now that pushes academic learning early.
Pushes it further and further down beyond what is actually it's counterindicated by their sensitive period or their readiness, but it's our social expectation.
Right. So what this means is you're going to encounter some social expectations around you. People are going to be asking, does your child know their ABCs? My child does. Why doesn't yours? Oh, so sad for you. Right. And then you're like, oh no, I was supposed to teach them that. Right. Or you just see it all around. Every time you go into Netflix and you check out the toddler shows that they've got on, they're all about learning your ABCs, and they're all about learning your numbers and your colors. And maybe you even go to the grocery store like I did when our children were very little. I don't know if you remember this, but I would go to the grocery store with the kids. We'd be standing in line ready to check out our groceries. And along the way, we had been doing things like feeling how heavy the oranges were and smelling things, and being empowered by picking out the things that involving them and like what they wanted to buy too. Talking about how the vegetables grew, like all that good stuff that we would consider good education happening at the grocery store. And then we would get to the checkout line, and the person ahead of me would turn around and she'd be like, "Oh, you got little kids, how cute. What color is this?" And my 2-year-old would be like, and she's like, "Does he know his colors yet?" And it was well-meaning. It's like, what else are you going to do with a little child? You want to interact with them.
Maybe not talk to them, I guess.
Maybe. But people do,
They want to
friends. They
talk
do. They
to,
want to talk,
yeah, they want to,
and they're going to say,
they love, I mean,
do
they love
you know
kids.
what is this plus this? And they kind of quiz your kids. And that always really annoyed me and kind of offended me because I'm like, you have no idea, lady, how much energy it has taken to get these kids grocery shopping. We've been here for a whole 45 minutes and we managed to get through with like 3 meals. We shopped for it and we got to get out of the store before there's a tantrum, right?
That's right.
But not so to the rest of society. They're all just like, oh, your child is 2, so can your child sing the ABC song? Your child is 3, they must know all their colors. Oh, your child
they're
is 5.
5. Yeah, they have to be able to add,
That's
right?
right. That's right. They're already adding. I had a child, somebody quiz my kid on math one time. We were just sitting there. They found out I was a homeschooler. They were like, "Oh, what school do
Okay.
your children go to?" And I was like, "Oh, they homeschool." And she looks at my 6-year-old and she's like, "What's 30 times 5?" And he looks at her and this is our child actually just happened to be pretty good at mental math. Like that was one of his gifts. I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. Sometimes even today, like math is not my thing, friends. I love Montessori math, but math is not innate to me as a person. But my child just sat there in kind of silence. And she just kind of waited, and then she gave me the look, right? Like, your child doesn't know what they're supposed to know at this age. And then eventually he spit out the answer and she just kind of shut up. But like, that was a very stressful experience for me,
Right.
and for him. But still, people have those kind of expectations.
Exactly. We live in the world that we live in. We're all a product of that. So, you expect a child. Can your child read out loud fluently by age 8? Oh, they can't. Well, it must be something wrong.
Right.
Must be wrong with you.
Right. Must be wrong with
or
you.
Dad.
It must be because they've been homeschooled.
Or it must be
right?
because you're not testing them hard enough.
Right.
You're not forcing them to learn. And like, what is this idea that a child should be able to read fluently out loud by age 8? Maybe it comes from somewhere. I don't know, actually. I think it is sort of like half remembered expectations that then pass along, and our own fuzzy memories of the past. We all went to school in some way, so we're all like, when I was 8 years old, I could blah blah blah. So we have all these funny ideas.
And we level our books too in education,
Totally.
right? We level them, level 1 books, level 2 books. And we have this expectation. They're even sometimes age leveled, like for 7 to 8-year-olds, for 9 to 10.
My mother's a librarian, and she's talked about this before, the AR reading program, which I think is kind of, I don't think is quite as popular as once was. But the person who invented that, it wasn't meant to be like this comprehensive leveling. It just got turned into that because, again, this is like goes to the problem. It's not that we don't know what's right or wrong. It's just our systems don't really allow us to do the right thing. Honestly, the schools are not really, because of money mostly, and social expectations and things like that. So we have to combat all of those things when we are trying to work with our children and figure out what is the expectation. So I want to pause real quick because Dr. Shelley has written.
Hi, Dr. Shelley.
She says, our Monty classroom is at home, which feels like the grocery store, meaning it is challenging to keep their focus 3 and 5 inside the classroom and not running to toys elsewhere in the house.
Yes.
Well, as lifelong homeschoolers,
that is normal.
That is normal.
Yeah, that is normal.
That's a tough one. To be honest, I guess my first reaction is, even though you have toys and they're not wanting just to eat the thing that's on their plate, like finish your meal. The fact is that you are engaging with a home-based learning. You are providing them whether they're going to school outside or not as well, or this is entirely it. You're obviously creating an environment and you have a mindset. You're here, you're listening, you're thinking about it. And yes, we're all tempted. If there's a candy bar in the house, how many of us have sat in the chair dreaming of the ice cream in the freezer or something like that, even though we're full? Like, it's just, to err is human. So of course the child could have that inclination, but your house isn't filled with only candy bars, right? It's not just ice cream all the time. And it's okay. Like, it's okay to accept that the focus isn't always going to be there. The other is to remember that second, I think it was second in our list, observe, or there was third, observe, 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 document. So even if they're running off and playing with a toy, what is the play that they're engaging with for this age group of 3 to 5? Is it pretend play? Are they working with fine motor skills? Are they doing things? Are they working with their hands in some other ways? At full sensorial? There can be things that are being learned through creative play, even if they're using a non Montessori material. It's the materials aren't the magic. It's the philosophy. It's the theory. Even Maria herself said that, right? That's the piece that really matters. So don't beat yourself up too much about it, would be my bottom line. I guarantee that you're already curating your home in a way, just based on the evidence that I have here, that you're already curating your home in a healthy way. And just accept that sometimes people want to eat ice cream.
Yeah, and as you said, the toys aren't necessarily an ice cream equivalent.
Totally, that's right.
They could be really good toys, and you're the one who gets to decide what goes in your house.
It is your house.
If
That's
there are
right.
toys that you don't like your child playing with, get rid of them. They don't have to be on the
Put
plate
them
of
away.
food.
Yeah,
Put them away. Yeah. But if they're available, then, and we are following the child, we are making the assumption that we are trusting that the child is going to get what they need with what they are drawn to.
That's
And I'll
right.
tell you, our children were so drawn to pretend play like nobody's business.
Play
Like,
silks,
oh my gosh,
dress up,
little stuffies. I mean,
stuffies.
they were the biggest role players. So when I encounter people in the Montessori community who are like, oh, Montessori isn't very imaginative, or we don't allow our child to pretend play, I'm like, wait a minute, this is like wired into a lot of children. Not all children. There are some children who just don't really super respond to pretend play or to certain toys, and maybe they are gravitating more to like a structured type of play material, and that's okay. Like, some kids like puzzles, and some kids like
Play silks.
like Barbies and running
dolls
around. Like,
and
yes. And so often,
swinging,
and in fact, this
sticks
reminds
and-
me of this photo we saw in our community recently. Did you see the two little skeletons that were dressed up in Barbie clothes?
That's right.
So as soon as you introduce something to your child, they're going to integrate it into whatever kind of
That's
play
a great example.
they
So
learn best
in
with,
Constellation,
right?
we were doing bone this month, and one of the classics is they have a little skeleton.
Yeah.
Everybody comes up with different names. We call ours Mr. Thrifty, but it's just an anatomically correct little skeleton, big or small. It's like a classic. And so some of the parents went out and purchased them. You can find them here or there. And the children, they posted a photo of their kids dressing up their Mr. Thrifty.
Oh my gosh, we've had photos of skeletons in all kinds of ways. Someone posted them all dressed up. One of them was lounging on the couch with the kids, and the kids are like, "Hey, look at my new friend." One of them was sharing a snack with a child. One of them was inside a dump truck. Like,
so these are not in the curriculum.
No, they're not.
But this is absolutely fine. They're
Yes.
blending their toys with this material. They're experiencing it. They're going to know a lot more about the human skeleton than I think a lot of their peers who are not getting the same kind of lesson or exposure in a traditional setting. So that kind of goes back to that thing, like whatever you're blending together, there's nourishment in it.
Yeah. And we have tips.
Okay.
So we've talked about the 3 R's, how a lot of people expect those. Our expectations of those are often not age appropriate, although early exposure can lead children to learning them earlier, as Maria Montessori discovered herself. When we offer it, put it on the plate, children will often take it and run with it, which is very exciting. But with the removal of expectations, we can allow that process to happen much more naturally. Right?
That's right.
So we've got these social expectations around children that we are feeling kind of worried about or maybe beholden to, but there are also practical expectations that we have of our children's learning, right? And I'm thinking, you can think about practical life. That's an easy way to kind of transition into that. So maybe like how to use a knife without cutting yourself. There is a proper way to use a knife where you're not as much in danger of cutting your fingers. And there is a very improper way of using a knife where you're very likely to injure yourself.
That's right.
We've all learned those lessons. Hopefully learn them in the least dangerous way
The
possible.
least expensive or amputation related.
Right.
Like fewest stitches possible.
But again, like that is what I would consider a critical piece of information and skill that your child needs to know before they start being able to do advanced cooking, right? So that's a critical thing that your child needs
and
to
we
know.
need to respect it as a piece of learning that should happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, schools aren't generally teaching
No, they
that.
don't. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a very important thing to know when you're a grown up and making yourself food, how to do that.
Yeah, we all have to eat.
Right. Right. And most of us prepare our food. So another thing might be another practical skill that's super, super important is learning how to read a safety sign.
Yeah.
Like, what if you go to the park and it says, poison, these plants have just been sprayed, and that was just a place where you're like going to go forage or something. So that is it is critical that our children be able to learn how to read safety signs.
That's right.
Before they're in order to protect themselves, because what if they are allowed to go into the park and they are not under like our absolute direct supervision? We want them to be able to read those signs themselves and understand how to read directions for things. What if you buy a new toy and you want to know how it works, or a new piece of equipment? Although I know many people will just like get that equipment out and just troubleshoot it themselves without reading the directions. The directions can be super helpful.
They sometimes can be. Yeah.
Yes. How about if you're in a group of people and you're all doing, you got your own pots, right? You're making your pottery, but they're all getting kind of mixed up. How do you know whose is whose? Maybe having a way to write your name,
Right.
Put your name on something and say like, these are mine, is an important skill to know. Like being able to write your name, it's critical. What if you invite some people over, you're going to serve them a meal and there happen to be 5 people at your table and you got this much food? It's a very practical and important skill to know how to divide that food up equally so that you can feed all of your guests, and one guest doesn't receive the lion's share and the rest receive the mouse share.
That's right.
So these are practical learning skills,
and they are related to those good things that you're putting on a plate. What is what is dividing a meal? That is math. What is writing your name? That's writing. What is reading a sign or directions? That's language. That's reading. What is learning to cut with a knife? That's practical life. And also the thing that you're cutting, assuming it's food, it can also be a part of the practical life or the human study of humankind and food. So these are practical expressions that are actually contained within those subject areas. That kind of, again, it goes back to the question of like, what if they want to play with toys as well as their curriculum? And it's really about the purpose, the intent, and how they're using that. It can be very, very beneficial, actually.
Okay, I want to wrap up our session with a little discussion about that word force, right? The idea that we need to, we don't want to force our children to learn how to write their name, right? We don't want to force them to be able to add things together, right? Regardless of the societal expectations, we don't want to force them to do these things. We want them to have the joy of learning in their heart, right? And to become naturally motivated. So let's start with a question. I like to ask some questions about things. I was telling David before, whenever I'm kind of parsing through a problem that comes to me in the form of a parent request for help, I like to kind of parse through the language that's being used. So we've got this word called force. It's often used with educational, lessons, thinking about forcing somebody to learn something. We know it's bad. We don't want to do it. But can we actually force a child to learn? That was a question I asked myself. And I had to think about the answer. Can you force a child to learn? Learning is one of those things that really requires a lot of motivation, right? I can sit there with the pottery, but if, could somebody like force me to become better at the clay? I guess they could. And in which ways could they? They could like put their hands over mine and like physically make me mash the clay into the right shape, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm just sitting there and I'm refusing, they could like physically make me do it. Okay, we know that we don't want to do that with kids. They could shame me into doing it. They could say, Aubrey, you were the worst one in the class. Oh my gosh.
I can't
Everyone
believe how
else
bad this
has made
is.
something beautiful and you have made mush, right? We could shame them. And we know that shame often does make people comply, right? Like
Totally.
nobody wants to feel humiliated. We can manipulate them into it. We can say, "Well, look how good hers is. Why can't yours be like hers? I see, you've got a big pile of mushy clay there, but oh, look at this beautiful thing that she's making. Do you see how she's using her hands?" These are actual techniques that teachers use in the classroom, by the way. These are not just like I'm dreaming these up evil things to do
Yeah.
with
Did
your
you
kids.
ever go into a classroom, or maybe when you were a child, and have a classroom with stars?
Right. Gold
Gold stars.
stars.
It's a form of shame and
Mhm.
manipulation.
Or how about grades? How about grades? How about public grades? Where
Publishing your grades or handing them out
Mhm,
and reading off the grade as it's handed to you.
mhm. Yep,
That's a form of shame.
it is. Yeah. And teachers were actually taught not too long ago, and maybe even still, as a form of positive reinforcement. Teachers were literally taught to look at the children and say, I like how nicely so and so is sitting over there. Oh, I like how nicely so and so is sitting over there. Ooh, look, so and so has their hands in their lap. Oh, look, she's really paying attention to her math. And, it was kind of thought of as a kinder approach because you're not directly shaming the one
Yeah,
child
you're
and
not
saying,
saying he's bad.
you're
You're
not
saying, oh,
saying,
she's
"Hey,"
good
right, but still, the
compared to
child
that bad one.
still gets the
Of
message, right?
course, yeah.
You still get the message, like, your name's not being called as being one of the good ones, and you're obviously not doing the thing that other people, are doing, it, and
Totally.
so, yeah, you can get compliance that way, and that can be a kind of force, right?
Yeah, it's
And we
so
know we don't want that in
we
Montessori,
don't. You
and
can,
if you're here, I'm assuming you're already on the page,
or at the very least, you have an open heart to
right?
it. Yeah. So when I worked in the business world, I had a rule that you can buy somebody's compliance, but you can't buy their loyalty.
Mm.
So you can give them money, you can give them a raise, you can give them a title. It's all ways to buy compliance. Like you can buy their time. Like, okay, they'll stick around for a little bit longer to finish this project. Yeah, but you can't force them to be loyal or to stay forever. And that stems exactly from my philosophy of teaching, which is what I started as. And it's this concept like you can't force a child to comply. You can shame them, manipulate them, harm them in one way or the other. You could cajole them. You could give them money. You
Mhm.
can all kinds of way, all these extrinsic motivators and these harmful, negative, intrinsic motivators. You can use those. They work. They will get compliance, but they won't spark a joy of learning, and they actually won't uh, they won't make the child learn in a real way. They'll make the child comply. And what is the downstream effect of this, like at a social level? Well, this is one of the reasons why when we look at what kinds of kids succeed in school and in college and what kinds of kids don't, it's all comes down to kids who know how to do school
Mhm.
succeed, and those who don't fail.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's it. And what does it mean to do school? It means to know how to comply,
Yeah, to listen to the teacher,
to
to be
sit
quiet,
quietly, to turn
right?
in your
To hold your
homework,
body still.
yeah, to accept the shame
Mhm.
and uh, go for it. Like, oh, I'm the good one. I'm the good one. I get the extra gold star.
Mhm.
The kids who do really well. It actually comes. You've looked at all kinds of things, and for sure, literacy at the home and all those things are factors. But when we look at the long term, like who graduates and who doesn't, who goes on to college and who doesn't, it's kids who know how to do school, which tends to be because their parents kind of force them to do school properly. And why is that the case? Because that's how we structured school, because we make it a place
Yeah,
where we're trying to force learning. And all we're really doing is forcing compliance and then rewarding compliance, not genuine learning.
right. So we can ask another question, and that is this the same as setting a high bar for expectation of work? Okay. So setting a high bar for expectation of work, This is not what I would consider force.
No.
Children respond to high expectations. When Maria Montessori went into the classroom and she was like, you know what? Nobody expects children to be able to learn to read, but what if I were to give them letters? Like, let's see what will happen. That's holding a high bar of expectations by adding something extra nutritious that's like just, beyond the level of expectation that people normally have, offering it. Then you can see what happens and see if your child will rise to it. And usually they will.
That's
When
right.
children are very, very attuned to you, they have done studies even on little babies, seeing how often babies will like look at their caregivers and follow them around with their eyes, and it's almost constantly. Like you might be thinking, oh, I just put my little baby down and then I just kind of like do my thing and I come over and they're not really looking at me all the time, but actually they are looking at you.
Yeah.
They are following your every single movement. I know that we tend to be busy. You put your baby on your hip or in your carrier or whatever, you go about your business, and it's good for them to be out in the world with you. But what you're not realizing is what's really going on in that micro level is they are attuned. They are watching your lips. They're listening to every little tone
That's right.
you make in your language. They're taking in all the sights, the colors, and everything is coming together. And sometimes it can be a little sensorily overwhelming to a little baby. You'll notice that when they put their head in, or cry because they're overstimulated, right? But they're super tuned, and it's not like that disappears once they become toddlers.
No.
Again, your toddler is like bumbling around. They're like running around the house and doing their own thing and twirling and playing with their play silks. Meanwhile, you're over here sitting down doing a puzzle, and you're thinking, they have no clue of what I'm doing. Like, they're not watching. They're watching. They really are. They really are. And,
That's right.
And if they're not watching with their eyes, they're listening with their ears. So they're listening to you, or they're like physically aware of the space between you and them and what you're doing. And maybe they're just like glancing at you, but they're like hyper attuned. And they just still are. All the way through age 6 or so, children are hyper attuned to you, the adult, and what you are doing in your environment, or what their peers around them are doing too.
Increasingly with their peers as they move into that second plane.
Yes. And when they get into that second plane, then increasingly with peers and collaborative learning experience become more important. So I would say that it's not force to establish routines, and to set the bar and to put extra stuff on the plate that may or may not happen, right? And I will give you some tips that I teach in my primary course every single semester when we do the Homeschool the Redwoods primary course. This is something that we actually focus on pretty deep. This question of how do I get my child to actually do the Montessori materials themselves. So I'm going to end with some tips before we go. Mm-hmm. And that is number 1. If we don't force the child, we're thinking about what will motivate them to learn. And so what motivates a person to learn? Interest. Mm-hmm. If your child is interested in something and they're curious about it, you don't need to force anything. They're already there. Okay. Watching us model it, as they're so attuned to you, they're watching you. If you do more modeling with those materials that you want your child to do, they're naturally going to be watching you do it. And they're like, I don't have any statistics of this, but I can tell you they're just so much more likely to actually do that work if they witness you doing it a lot, right? Think about how many times you go through your day doing your regular household stuff. Think about, what if I were to repeat these Montessori, works with the Montessori materials, and I were to do that over and over and over while my child is in the room, they're just naturally, biologically, they're going to be attuned to it. They're going to want to go try it.
Of course,
anything that you do as an adult,
how many times have you seen the toddler, the
right?
little one, pick up a little broom, play house, play mommy or daddy?
Yeah, but they want to pick up the big broom that you use.
Well, right. So they're picking up the thing. Well, that's exactly right. So they're wanting to replicate what they're seeing. This was one of the things Montessori kind of really, she wasn't the first, but she really realized this. And, it's an essential part of that learning process. Like, we have such low expectations for children that we really do them a great disservice. It's a terrible sin. And all we have to do is watch them to realize they are so much more capable
Mhm.
uh, when we uh, when we allow them to go out and explore. You could see that when you're watching them model.
Right.
When
When
we're
you're
modeling
modeling.
and you're seeing it come back to you.
Yep. Okay. So we've got interest. We've got us modeling for them. So more modeling. And we've got practice, right? So the more you do something, the better you're going to get at it, the more it's going to feel good, right? So I'm going to be practicing my pottery because I know that the more I make mush out of it and refine my technique, the better it's going to feel to me, the more success I'm going to have with it, and then I'm going to be more motivated to do more of it,
That's
right?
right.
But if I just do it the one time and I end up with like this whole thing that falls apart, and then I'm like, woof, I guess I'll do that again sometime later. I'm not going to learn, and it's not going to be motivating, and I'm not going to feel good.
That's
I
right.
know that I've got to put in the practice. So with repeated exposure and you modeling for them, exposing them to it, putting it on the nutritious plate over and over and over and over again, it's going to encourage them to practice more, and then you're going to find more motivation setting in
That's
too.
right.
Right now, when we get in the primary years, we really try to lean more into allowing the child to lead, right?
Hmm.
We follow the child in the primary. In lower elementary, there's a little more structure. And so I usually say in lower elementary, like, that is a time when it's okay to collaborate and to make agreements about what things need practice. And so we would do that by talking to our child about what's important, what skills they're trying to learn, making sure it's really relevant to them, and then helping them develop a plan for practice. And yes, we're going to be there to be like the guide in it. So
Hmm.
my great example with this was handwriting. Handwriting was so super important. Learning how to write was important to me to teach my child. By age 5 or 6, I knew it was also a societal expectation that he be able to write his name on art projects that we did at the library or, other things. And so we just made an agreement like every day we're going to do a little handwriting assignment. What do you feel is feasible for you to practice? So it was like an agreement. So, yes, there's pressure in there, there's high expectations in there, but there's not like shame, manipulation, force in there,
Hmm.
right? So that can come in lower elementary. So if you've got little ones, you really can just be so much looser, right? And just say, you know what, I don't have to worry about that really until about first grade, and kind of delay some of that worry about those
Yeah,
those things.
some things in the past were actually
Yeah.
okay. Like we used to have an expectation of what children would do in school and what kindergarten looked like and first grade looked like. And I honestly think there was probably a healthier perspective.
Hmm.
And as a homeschooling family, you have an opportunity to bring that back to life
Yes.
where it can be much more balanced and fulfilling and not just another worksheet, another high expectation, another set to force it. Sorry, high expectation of a socially set outcome rather than a high expectation of something authentic and useful, which I think is your fourth point.
Yes.
Purposeful
Purpose.
learning. It has to be purposeful. That's why I think that must be why kids love to mimic. I just saw the comment here from Devin about
Mm-hmm.
mimicry of mommy lately. I think it's because they sense that it's real. Like I don't sweep the floor for fun.
Right.
I sweep it because it's dirty. You
And it
know,
happens to be fun to do it anyway.
it can be.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
there is an
Maria
underlying
loved
purpose
to
there.
scrub.
Yeah.
Some people love to, folding laundry or cooking. These are chores, right? We call them chores because they could be taxing, but they can also be really, really pleasurable. And above all, they have purpose. We need to keep our home clean. We need to feed ourselves. And the more we can imbue that with joy, the more it can be pleasurable and not just a chore.
Mhm.
And yet purposeful. It has real purpose. So we want our child,
Yeah.
to your earlier examples, we want the child to learn how to read, not because, the government tells us they got to learn how to read, but because we want them to have unlock that power. It's just an amazing human skill, and it unlocks so many other things. So
It
why are the
does.
3 R's important? 3 R's are important because they're like a key to everything else. If I know how to read, I can read history. If I know how to draw, I can write letters. I can manipulate a pen. I can make art, if I could do math, I can be a cook. I can do this and that and the other thing. Science becomes architecture. It all becomes meaningful to me, even at a little age. Even if you're 7 years old, the kinds of things that you're doing as an architect or a mathematician or a cook or whatever, it's scaled for a 7-year-old, but it's all enabled by these foundational things. So that we say that they're that's why they have such value. It's not because somebody told me I had to do it, but because they're keys that unlock it, and they have real purpose.
Right.
And when we connect that to that purpose, then it sort of answers that question. And this, I think, then ties back to that high expectation. I love to underscore that. I love that one a lot. I think sometimes people think that because we want the child to be able to have a lot more control over his or her learning, that we want to follow the child, that we have low or no expectations, or it's just like, whatever, anything goes. That's not the case at all. That is wrong. You should have high expectations, but you should also have high belief that the child will want to rise to those expectations. The problem is when we have high expectations, but no belief that the child can do it. And that then leads us to this conclusion of we need to use some form of manipulation or shame or something else to get them to comply with those high expectations. That's where we break. And the solution to that is, like you said, spark their interest, watch what they're doing. I love that thing about play. Do it yourself. They're watching us model. If you want them to read, you should read. If you want them to cook, you should cook. If you want them to, whatever the things that you want to impart to them, talk about them, do them, engage with them, and do them regularly with them. Or sit and do them on your own and have them watch. You want them to do the continent puzzle, sit and do the continent puzzle. And they may not do it with you, but they're watching, you're modeling it for them, and you're doing it regularly. And then tied to something real. I don't want you to do this continent puzzle or do this practical life activity just for fun, but because it unlocks something great about the world. And we're going to learn that and we're going to build on it. So the child, let's say, comes to a point where they have a super interest in lions. You know what connects to lions? Geography. So knowing about the shape of the earth and the geography and where lions live on the earth and being able to point to it is totally relevant because they have an interest in it now. And all these things can connect together. It becomes real and purposeful.
All right. So I hope this little pep talk is leaving you with a renewal in the interest of Montessori learning and self-education,
Totally.
which is really what it's all about, finding the joy, finding that inner motivation. Remember, friends, if you want to join the new primary course, the enrollment date for early birds is October 10th. So Monday is for that.
Monday the 10th.
Constellation is open anytime. So if you feel like you're floundering and you need some planning guidance, you could jump in tomorrow or today.
And if you're not ready yet and you just love hanging out with us in these lives, we'd love to continue to join us. Send us questions, comments, things like that. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Otherwise, you can always reach us at hello@childoftheredwoods. We're on Instagram. And love to hear from you and stay in touch.
Totally. And we never say this, by the way, but it would super help us if you could like and subscribe.
Oh, yes.
Because I think that actually would help our YouTube channel to grow. So anyway, to those of you who do that for us, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Take care.